name's Chris Nail. I'm the head of education for the New Mexico Museum of Art and the New Mexico Museum of Art Latin Contemporary. I'd like to welcome you to our Artist Talk series for our exhibition Off Center, New Mexico Art 1970 to 2000, which is made possible through very generous support of Pat and Jim Hall, so we want to make sure that we thank them. Tonight, we're honored to welcome Donald Woodman. Donald's photograph Rodeo in the West, Rodeo of the West number 22 can be seen upstairs in gallery number 2, and it's part of Off Center's intersection of place and spectacle. Donald's work, both individually and in collaboration with his wife Judy during this time period, have had a lasting impact on the art of New Mexico and beyond. And if I can be indulged for a very, very short personal story. A number of years ago when I was working at and teaching for, at that point, I don't remember if it was the College of Santa Fe or Santa Fe University of Art and Design. There's a few years that blend together there. There was I think it was a Saturday when David Scheinbaum, who's in the back, and I brought a number of photography students down from the school to visit Donald and Judy in their studio. So an aspect of Off Center is how influential that period of 1970 to 2000, and this was a little outside of that, how influential that time was on contemporary art, both at that time and continuing on to today. So the work that was created, the artists that were a part of the different movements that were happening at that time. But I think it's interesting to note that that also has continued to carry forward. So that group of students that we brought down in one of those, slightly scary 15-passenger vans, I believe there was a very large bag of gummy bears at some point. It was an interesting ride. But what I can tell you is working with those students, freshmen all the way through seniors, who were able to come with us and to spend time with Donald and Judy, to hear their stories, to receive that kind of warmth and encouragement and acknowledgement from people that they had been reading about, they had been studying, and to be accepted as peers, as people who were starting to create their own period in the contemporary art world. That was a really powerful moment for all of those students. And it wasn't something that they talked about for a day or a week or a month after that visit, but we had freshmen who were still talking about it at graduation. So on that level, thank you to you both. So with that, if everyone would please join me in welcoming Donald Woodman.
Hi, so this is the first PowerPoint I've ever done of my own work. And it's important to note that this is a throwback. Both of these images go back to the 1980s. So it made me think a little bit about what that means. Back before digital photography, before the element of digital photography entered the world of photography. And I thought I would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what that meant back then, and also the fact that for me, every photo has a story, so I can tell you the stories about this. I came to New Mexico in 1972 from the East Coast. I have an undergraduate degree in architecture, and I had a design professor at school who saw that I was going to rebel against the corporate structure of architecture and not have a happy life, and suggested, since he saw that I had a talent, what he considered a talent in photography, that maybe I should pursue a career in photography. Back then they didn't teach photography. This is in 1969, 68, 69. They really didn't teach photography in school. And so I started out my career, what do you do if they don't teach you something you learn on your own? I went through the architectural journals and discovered that there's this photographer, Ezra Stoller, on the East Coast, because I came from Boston area and more East Coast oriented. Julius Schulman was the West Coast version of Ezra Stoller in California. But I went back to New York and banged on his studio door and said, I'll come to work for you for nothing. And it took me a while, but I got into his studio and started working with him, became his assistant, And that was the start of my career in photography. I quickly decided, well, not quickly, it took me 3 years, to decide that commercial photography was not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It's a brutal way to make a living, and I didn't work well with art designers. And when you're working with magazines, those are the people that control the photo shoots. I fortunately was introduced to Minor White, who taught up at MIT. There's also, you have to understand the Vietnam War era. I was very much involved in the anti-war movement, and so I was juggling, kind of escaping the draft, and having grown up in Massachusetts, I had to deal with the draft board there. So when I left Stoller, I went up, Minor was teaching at MIT, and the way you got in to work with him was you had a portfolio review and your astrological chart, which fit in very well with Santa Fe, but I didn't know about Santa Fe then. I was Minor's assistant. I ran the photo gallery at MIT until Minor came along and said, perhaps it's time for you to get kicked out of the nest and go find your own voice. And I had made a trip out to the West Coast, the first time I crossed the Mississippi, and stopped in, what we did is we grabbed Minor's phone book and looked up all the photographers along the way, and there were a number of photographers who lived in New Mexico, and we stopped here, and I sort of was my first introduction to coming to New Mexico. Went back to the East Coast, and Minor said, time to leave, and I had the opportunity to come out here and work at the Solar Observatory in Sunspot, New Mexico, Sacramento Peak Observatory, as a research photo assistant running a photo lab and doing film work. That's how I came out to New Mexico. It wasn't an attraction of any knowledge about what moving to New Mexico. I flew out here with camera bags, some clothing was dropped off. I guess there was a flight through El Paso that ended up in Alamogordo and was on the side of the road. In Alamogordo, for you who don't know about Sunspot, and the observatory was started in 1949, I believe, by Harvard University, and it was supported by the Air Force. And it was a perfect job for me because everybody told me that my work being part of the anti-war movement would not allow me to work for the government. And here I had the opportunity to go and work in an Air Force supported installation. I actually worked for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Research people in Boulder, but I was stationed down there. So that's how I ended up in New Mexico. And one of the thrills of my life was joining the flying club at Alamogordo at Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, and going down to the Air Force Base and flying little airplanes out of the Air Force Base. And you'll understand later why that was so important. And also the other thing is I never really saw myself as a photographer. I mean, I worked in the photographic medium, but being with an architectural background and going to the University of Cincinnati, I had taken painting and drawing classes. I had worked, it was an integrated program where it was sort of Beaux-Arts based and Bauhaus based. So you honed your talents as a problem solver, doing creative things, especially the Bauhaus integration of all the various arts and things like that. So I went to the observatory. Of course, it was a solar observatory, so I had a daytime job. And it was actually pre-digital. I was there for 5 years and kind of got to the point where they were switching to more digital work. But I'm someone who gets bored easily, and I don't like to be bored. And we had this, working for the government, there's always a back room full of stuff to play with, and we had a machine shop, it was also, they had some of the first computers there. We had one building which had a big IBM punch card computer. So it was introduced to a kind of a tech world. We had a lot of support from Kodak for special films, for doing astrological photography and different things like that. So I got to play with a lot of toys. And this is a photograph that I decided to try to take because I was going to make a movie about the observatory. And this is the sun rising behind the famous Tower telescope at sunspot. Now, you may ask why I wanted to do this and how it came about. Because it's not like you just take a camera and go out and shoot this. This was the photo setup down in the valley, and the sunspots at 9,200 feet up on that mountain ridge, looking down over the Alamogordo and the White Sands Missile Range area and everything like that. And I had a friend who was a computer expert, who's actually been involved in a number of space telescope designs, and also he was worked on trying to date the Ansel Adams famous photograph of moonrise over Hernandez, New Mexico. Anyway, I went to David Elmore. He lives in Boulder. He's always lived in Boulder. I said, hey, if I want to take a picture of the sun rising behind the Tower telescope, where do I have to be? I mean, it's like you only have like a 10-minute window in time between the sun moving its diameter across the horizon. And also you have to understand is when the sun, there are optical things going on. It just fascinated me technically how to do it. So he sat down and wrote a computer program. And the first day we went down there to do the setup, and we had chosen actually a telescope to shoot that picture with on 35 millimeter film. We were 75 feet off. So, but fortunately, we went out there, and also you have to understand the position. There's a road that goes from Alamogordo through White Sands Missile Range, and you can't leave the road. So we had to find a spot along that road where we could park, where we wouldn't get on the missile range and get arrested to do it. So we had our tape measures and things, and we barked for the next day to come down. You know, and this is like getting up at 3 and after working all day, getting up at 3 in the morning, packing up all the equipment, driving down into the basin. So this was the setup, but by the third day we had nailed it, and it became boring for me. Then the problem was we had to make sure we had a clear sky. So that's the nature, and I wanted to tell you the story, what went behind doing it. And I did the whole sequence. We went pre-sunrise through the sunrise, going behind the telescope, and it was a time, we didn't have motor drives, it was a hand exposed. And some of the other issues were the camera couldn't move because these were long exposures. You know, the telescope is of such a magnitude that it magnifies any motion. There were a lot, we didn't get it on the second try, and then we had to wait for the weather when there were no clouds and on and on. But we got it, and I thought that was interesting. And David and I decided, well, since we're getting up and doing these crazy things, let's build a night sky camera. So this was one of the photographs we took with in the so-called helicopter pad at Sunspot for emergencies. We built a thing. But this is one of the photographs we took in night sky. And what really interests me is in the upper right quadrant of the photograph is a constellation. I mean, it's like a galaxy. And I went, wow, that's out there and you don't see it. You only see it with these, with cameras and things like that. This was our night sky telescope that we had set up. There I am with my shoulder length hair. That's why I used to like to go out on this. Because here comes the hippie flying airplanes out of the airbase. So that was, those are the things David and I did. Later on, actually, before the pandemic, I could never David finally retired here in the 2000 teens. And he called me up and he said, you know, as a retirement project, what I wanted to do, he wanted to do is, he said, I wanted to photograph the full Milky Way, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. He said, and I've done it, and he had a camera set up in the Boot Hill of New Mexico to do the northern hemisphere. A number of many photographers have locations down there where they go and do setups and things. The other one was someplace in South America, I don't remember. But he called me up and he says, I have this photograph, but I don't know what to do with it, and I can't really, well, I haven't happened to have an expertise in preparing digital files to go to print, and they said, send me the file, I'll take a look at it. So I worked on this file. This is the complete Milky Way. We printed it out at 10 foot long, so you could really see it sits in my head. But we haven't found anybody who wants to show it or have it in their collection. David keeps calling me up and saying, what are we going to do with this photo? I said, well, I keep trying operating people. But it's a beautiful, and it's not like, I don't know if you follow digital photography today, but now you can buy night sky images to put in the background of your thing, or you can buy all kinds. But this is the real deal. This is not some pseudo-professional night sky photograph. And if you're an astronomy buff and you see the actual print, it's a fabulous tour through the galaxy. After I left the observatory, I moved up to Albuquerque. There was a group of young artists living there. It was sort of a nascent. Albuquerque was developing as its own center for creativity, unlike Santa Fe, which was sort of the center. But there was arts going on all over the state, and I kind of fell in with that group in the North Valley of Albuquerque. And at that same time, Agnes Martin had left where she was living in Cuba, New Mexico, and moved into a storefront in Albuquerque. And me, Judy and I talk about it, my method of working is, oh, that's an interesting idea, let's try it. That's how I get into a lot of trouble. But I met Agnes, and all these artists were like, Agnes Martin, I didn't know who the hell she was. So I looked her up in some of the art magazines and found out. She was working on her second film, which never saw the light of day or the light of the projector. And she needed someone to run second camera and she was not a photographer at all, had no technical skills. So for $400, I signed on to be second camera and technical support. And we worked on that, and it was filmed in New Mexico. It's a great art, the footage is a great architectural dig. If you go to the bottom of the Galisteo dump, you may find the footage, because that's where it ended up. After we finished shooting the film, I was buying property in Galisteo, and we moved out to my property in Galisteo. I lived in this teepee. We built Agnes's studio there. Later on, I designed and built her a rammed earth house, because I teamed up with an architect friend of mine in Santa Fe. We started a rammed earth company. To all you artists sitting in the audience, you can't make a living doing something else and try to be an artist. And I thought, we'll start this construction company and it'll support me doing what I wanted. It didn't work out. But I spent 7 years as Agnes's assistant. You want to find out more about it? I wrote a book about it, which is it's out of print, maybe in the bookstores in the museum, but I'm not sure. But you can get it as a Kindle edition. Anyway, we moved out to my property in Galisteo and lived there, and I worked and lived there. The picture upstairs from the rodeo, the West is Galisteo Rodeo. This is the slide, and also, I'm not going to show you. The best way to see this work, you can go on my website, you'll see it is better than you can see it here. But I'm a strong believer in go look at the art, and one of the rodeo pieces is upstairs, and the other piece I want to talk about is up there too. But Galisteo is a small town rodeo, because I lived in Galisteo and I knew the people that owned the rodeo ground, I got access to the rodeo. And I made sure I was there every year for about 5 years, the early 80s, which at one point was when Judy and I met, one of the few times that we met at the Galisteo. But this is me in the 1980s. I finally cut my hair. This was all shot on a late 1800s glass plate box camera, which I adapted to Polaroid film. Having worked with Miner and in Boston, Polaroid Corporation was based there. They had what was called Polaroid Archive and Project, and they would trade. They didn't give film. They would trade film for prints, and so I got into the program, and so I used a lot of Polaroid film. It was very, very convenient to work on Polaroid film living in a teepee because I didn't have a real dark room. I used to wash my in Polaroid because these are done on Polaroid black and white negative film, so you have a real negative. So I used to put the negatives after they went through the sulfite solution into a bucket in the yard with a garden hose and hang in the teepee for washing. This is the Rodeo in the West series that I finally curated. It's been seen a few times. I'm trying to get an artist book, which has taken me 20 years to find someone to bind for me, which should hopefully sometime in the next year or two it'll be finished. But that's the whole series. And you go on my website, and my assistant Apollo, who's here today, who helped me do this PowerPoint, told me that they've upgraded my website so you can see the whole series. Oh, by the way, the buffalo image at the top there, that was shot in Colorado. With that box camera, I was standing 5 feet away from the buffalo. Crazy, crazy Donald. The other image I only wanted to talk about the 2 images in the show, and tell the stories behind them. Judy and I met, got married, and started working together in the fall of 1985 on a project with the subject of the Holocaust. She had moved to New Mexico from California in the early 80s and didn't really come out in New Mexico until 85 in the arts community, and we met. And she came to me when we met. She said, I'm thinking about this project about the Holocaust. Are you interested? And I went, that sounds interesting. Let's do it. So the image, there's a whole series. I'll show you a couple others from which Judy and I gave to the museum. I think they showed, when you had a show with the other building, they showed the whole series. But it's an interesting series. It was an offshoot of the Holocaust material because of the idea of the nuclear Holocaust. New Mexico, the center of nuclear industry, Los Alamos, Sandia Labs, Trinity site, and also at that time when we were working on the Holocaust project, they were trying, which they succeeded doing in getting the whip site in southern New Mexico. It was a big fight about doing it. So one of the ways that the state was trying to convince the citizens of New Mexico was that they had a model whip truck, which they took around to various sites. They brought it up here to the State House to get people used to seeing these trucks and getting used to seeing these containers with nuclear waste in them and seeing how benign it is. So Judy and I were talking about doing this series on nuclear wasted. And I said, well, we need a nuclear truck. We need that whip truck. And they were doing this project. So I was notorious for telling people I was press. So I came, where were we living? We were in Santa Fe. We were living in Santa Fe. So I said, I'll go down to the State House. I'll photograph the whip truck, and we'll have the base photos that we need for later work. This is actually a photo, the photo of that whip truck put on photo linen And the way Judy and I work together, no one's really looked at the combining of painting and photography, is how the photography tells the setting in the place, and the painting tells the history of what's in it. So I talked to the guy, the whip truck driver, this guy here who had his little dog in the cab of the truck, which he left running all the time, to be in air conditioning, and said, hey, can I take a picture of you out, I'm with the press, can I take a picture of you out on I-25 going north? We need it for our press coverage. He said, sure, let me talk to my state police escort. Well, as soon as I'm done here, we'll go out. I said, $50 do it? He said, sure, no problem. So we went north of Santa Fe here on I-25 with the state trooper and the whip truck, and I took that picture. Judy and I talked, and it was fun doing it. Judy, and later on we got a newspaper down in Jarl, New Mexico to hire me as a reporter, and Judy and I went down to the whip site as reporters to get, and we actually went down into the salt mines. One of the things we discovered, and I want to talk about some of these images and where they came from, was the tailing piles, which still exist out in Grants, New Mexico, right along I-20, I-40. And so Judy and I decided we had to go out and see that. So I'm going, tailing piles, uranium tailing piles. I bought a bunch of lead bags. I said, if I'm going out there with film, black and white film in particular, I can't be sitting around on the side of the road with all this radiation next to me. So we went out there. This is the contact sheet, 4x5, of those tailing piles that this work was created. So the print, again, is on photo linen. No longer made, actually it was made in Germany, very highly detailed photo print, which can be painted on. So Judy painted the radiation emitting from these things. So that was, I just wanted you to see that kind of thing, me and my lead bags and things like that. We live in Berlin now, which is about 50 miles from Trinity site. So every once in a while, I look in the papers, oh, Trinity site's because it's only open 2 days a year. Oh, it's open today, and I'll get in the car and drive down. We went down to the Trinity site, and this is a photograph. There's a contact sheet from being down there. And Judy painted this beautiful painting. They're all very modest, they're 16 by 20, of the effects of radiation that affected the Japanese when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we actually have visited the Japanese sites. But I sort of want to tell you a little bit, because I'm not classified, I've never shown in a photo gallery. I've never been in a photo show. I get hung in the other section of the museum when they show my work. So I sort of wanted to show you how these come about. And tell you some of the stories about that kind of thing. And also tell you a little bit about the background. This was taken, Judy and I were Judy's had a run the last 2 years of major retrospectives in New York, and at the Serpentine in London, and Arles, Luma Foundation in Arles, where we went out. She and I, as Chris said earlier, worked together, worked separately, worked whatever. But one of the things I wanted to acknowledge is the fact that when I met Judy, it was an incredible opportunity for me, because I had never been in an environment where I could use all my talents as a photographer, as a creative person, and bring it to bear on subject matter of really important ideas. And so being with Judy really allowed me the ability to blossom as an artist, but also to extend my creative abilities to work on subject matter that was really important, and also to explore the idea of what does it mean to be a guy and a feminist. And we talk a lot about how because we both I came up in the 70s, and the women's movement, especially being in Boston and how back then a lot of the feminist ideology and ideas were guised in gender and not in values, and how that was not really right, and how to turn that around, and how to introduce the ideas of feminist values and feminist ideas into a patriarchal society, and allow men to have the comfort to express camaraderie and the joining of those things. And she and I have worked, I mean, for me, it's an incredible opportunity. And I'm always saying, that's not a good idea, let's do it. So this is a photograph from about a month ago. When we do this in a month? One of the things Judy has been doing are these spoke pieces from back in the 60s and 70s. When we got together, and she had the opportunity back in 2011 to work with Pacific Standard Time and pick up where she did fireworks again. It was something that I got to participate in. I got to participate both in helping design and create structures, but also there I am with the camera, photographing, making the photographic documentation of the thing. And here we are on the scaffold in Arles, France, and the execution of the piece. And sometime in the next few weeks, I think, we may have up on our Instagram or on Judy's website some video from that kind of thing. But I want to also give you an opportunity, if anybody has any questions, to ask me questions. But I wanted to leave you with somebody always told me you should leave people with a tune that they can't get out of their head and a happy little thing. So, if you want to follow I've been doing little short videos for the last several years. If you follow me on Instagram, I do these moments of Zen. That's one of my moments of Zen. Thank you all for coming. Questions, have at it.
The title of the book about your time with Agnes Martin?
Agnes Martin and Me.
All right. Thank you.
So if you can get it, well, I think you can buy it if you want a print version, if you go on throughtheflower.org, which is our nonprofit, I think they have print versions. You can get it on Amazon as a digital book. And it looks, I work very hard on the digital platform, so it is as elegant a book as it was in print.
Nice, thank you.
What is your perspective on the change from film to digital?
My photography has always been driven by technology and science and chemistry. And digital is just one more thing in the long history of photography. As a matter of fact, the number of commercial photographers that have come out to photograph Judy for articles and things like that are all shooting film now. And I'm going, because a few years ago, all the film labs I was using in LA and New York stopped processing film, but they're doing it again. And there's something about the way, I still shoot film, there's something about the way the film sees light that digital doesn't. And I'm also a strong believer that I'm not going to allow Apple to tell me how to be a photographer because I'm much more creative than a machine.
What lessons can you impart to men about being better feminists?
Oh, that's actually a young man asked me that question. It's a partner, Nadia, one of the founders of Pussy Riot, whom we befriended. Judy has her husband, John Caldwell, asked me, and I think one of the challenges are that social pressures are working against you. I I mean, that's what I found. I'm an outsider. I'm not, I don't go into a bar and watch sports on the thing, and people say, what do you hear about that? I know nothing about that. Those are not my values. It's real, I mean, there are a lot of things that I grew up with about the values of patriarchy, the competition, macho stuff, although you have to understand, I'm against the military, but I'm for the draft. I think everybody should go into some kind of public service so you become part of the community. I think the thing that destroyed us in this was a negative of the 60s, 70s anti-war movement was the anti-draft movement, which I was not for. I didn't want to go to Vietnam and kill people senselessly, but I think there's a certain thing about being thrown into a melting pot with people from all over and getting to know, breaking down the class thing. It's really hard. I mean, you have to find people that you can share this different values. So there are also a lot of women out there that don't support the feminist value system, and it's really hard working with them. I think you have to, make connections and find people that you have a shared likeness for and support those values and try to live your life accordingly. I'm not going to say that it's easy. I've been shut out of a lot of, I have not followed the carrot that, the carrot, especially in the art world. Follow the carrot, get all the rewards, follow the party line, and you get it. You don't get the rewards, so why even follow it? Stand up for human rights, stand up for humanist values, and hopefully we'll see a sea change. And I don't want to say, oh, it's easy, marry a feminist. It's not, that wasn't easy. I know that wasn't a good answer to your question. I'm sorry.
So as you think of the evolution of technology, as you've mentioned, and as somebody who has a scientific background, what do you think the next step is going to be in digital photography? Is it going to be anything that's going to have a return on investment for people? Are more megapixels going to, illuminate the field of photography more, or have we reached a limit?
I don't know. Why are people going back to using film? What is it about that attracts? I use I don't care. I don't care how many megapixels. I grew up. I came out of the tradition. I knew Ansel Adams. Binder White was of the 20th century modernist photographer. The F-64 group. Absolutely every shot. I'm a large format photographer. I have a 4x5 camera, an 8x10 camera. I have large format. I'm getting too old to like 40-pound cameras in the landscape, but I sometimes still do it. I don't know. Wherever it goes, it goes. Not what I'm not worried about.
But you aren't sitting around waiting for this to happen.
No, I have a toolkit, whatever I need to do what I want to do with. Is it a digital camera? Is it a film camera? Is it a pencil? My contact sheet, when Judy and I were traveling in Europe on the Holocaust project, I was shooting Polaroid and she was drawing on the Polaroids, and we have a visual dialogue back and forth about, well, this is this, and how are we going to present this image, and what do we need to do with that, and where's this idea coming from? It's about ideas. It's about getting an important idea and meaning across to people, and to check in with your audience to make sure you're communicating what you think you're communicating. A lot of art today, I don't understand it, and I thought I'm pretty well educated about that, I think.
Do you have a favorite piece of your own that you've done
No, actually, the question, Judy, I sat through a number of interviews. There are a number of questions that people ask, one of which is like that, which is your favorite piece. But especially, one of the things is people want to know your lineage. But one of the things I do is I list the women that have influenced my life. If that's any help. I don't have a list of artists, it's not like, I was influenced by Picasso and Kandinsky and no. I studied with Ezra Stowell. He taught me how to be an architectural photographer and craft. I studied with Minor White, who taught me how to see. I studied with Dan Margoulis, who taught me the craft of creating a wonderful image, whether it's photography or otherwise. And he's an expert. He comes from the old school of film, and he's an expert in taking digital images to print. And because Judy and I have done a number of books together, art books and whatever, that skill is really important, I think, in trying to convey these. I still think it's better to go look at work in the art museum. Agnes, I won't tell you what Agnes is. And Judy has given me an incredible ability to be able to do things I would never have the opportunity to do. No, I like that video at the end. That's why I wanted to share it with you. I thought, why not? Let them laugh and and walk out of this, because I can't get that song out of my head.
I was wondering if you have any thoughts about, because you manipulate images, you take documentary images and then you manipulate images as well as part of your creative process. But there's so much manipulation now of images that the first question I ask now when I see an image is I say, is that real? Like I've started to
Oh yeah, the AI thing.
So like AI and like that kitten is washing dishes, is that real? So what is your take on, is there any responsibility for a photographer to represent reality, or where is the line between representing reality in photography and manipulating images? How do you relate to those things?
Well, as soon as I push the shutter, I'm manipulating the image because I'm freezing a moment in time and seeing it whatever I chose to record it. Judy and I work together because of her incredible drawing skills to enhance the image. Like I said, the Holocaust Project is based on photos of a place in time and the history painting on, integrated into that. I don't know. Here, right in this institution, you can go down the hall and rent some goggles, and you can have four of our cats will AR reproductions of cats that are now dead that Judy and I have lived with. We'll take you on a tour through the museum, which I think is incredibly fun for kids. I don't know, do I think, if you're going to use it to create and tell people this is real, why do you want to fool people? Why do you want to manipulate people? I think that's the question you have to ask. And then why do people allow themselves to be manipulated? It's a great philosophical question, but I don't think I don't have the ability to answer it.
The format for the rodeo piece that's upstairs, the presentation format, do you want to talk about that? It's like printed on paper and then it's mounted on something and...
No, that's actually, the rodeo images were shot back in between 80 and 85, I think, on that camera I showed you, on Polaroid film. I really couldn't do them justice until I had a digital printer, because working with that film out in the dusty rodeo arena, those negatives suffer terribly from the heat, from the dust, from the dirt. And I'm not patient enough to sit and spot the silver gel in print that's so damaged. So being able to spot them in in a digital format once. I had the patience for that in print, and then I've always felt that those images deserved a large scale. For me was important. I mean, when I do a print, there's a reason for the size of it. It's not just big is better, but I wanted people to be, those images are, the wall signage does not address the intent of their images. They were an exploration into men manipulating nature and controlling nature. If you've ever been in the background of the rodeo, as I was in Paseo, you'd be out there with, and I lived with the ranchers and and the people who were my neighbors. And you'd be in the back of the chutes, which I tried to talk Judy to come with me one time, she wouldn't come. You're back there, and these guys are saying to their sons, "Oh, go ride that bull or that horse like you rode that at your girlfriend last night." I'm going, Jesus Christ, are these the value systems? Values you want to impart on your kids? Or would you say that to your daughter? So, I mean, that whole, and actually the book, the artist book that I created, actually I think you can buy a version of that on Amazon too. There's an essay written by, what was his name? Michael Kimmel, who's written extensively about masculinity and the construct of masculinity. He wrote a very short essay as a frontispiece for the rodeo book, and it's very good. It discusses these things, and you were asking me how you have to confront the construct of masculinity and find out what's driving all of that. I mean, and God knows it's on the front page of the news all the time now. I mean, I shake my head and go, how do people believe? It's like AI. It's like AI. It's an alternative reality that I don't believe in, and I don't accept, and I don't support. And
Besides Judy, do you have an assistant? Do you have?
There's my
The
assistant, Michael.
Okay.
Apollo Gomez, who actually he bails me out of a lot of technological canyons I dig myself into.
After having worked in Sunspot, does the James Webb and what's going on, does that interest you at all, or is that just history for you?
I didn't hear.
Does the James Webb and what's imaging in space, does
Oh,
that relate to
well,
your
David,
background from Sunspot?
yeah, my buddy David Elmore's been involved in the design of those telescopes. I think it's fascinating to be able to look that deep into space and theorize what you see. I mean, when I was there was a fight between people who looked at computer printouts of data from the sun and people who actually looked at the images that we were taking of the sun and trying to understand what's going on. Actually, recently this major solar event that has happened with the Northern Lights, and the reason the Air Force supported Sunspot is they are charged with global communication during wartime. And their mission was that if they could predict when solar activity was at a peak and would interrupt communication, it would not be a good time to have a war, so they could tell the War Department, don't have a war now because we can't support it. That's why they supported it. No, I'm fascinated by the images and what people are, finding out about. One of the things we did, we have a nonprofit called Through the Flower, and when we were up here in Santa Fe, I think, we were doing the nuclear waste thing. There were a number of artists, as you can see from the show upstairs. They're working on the nuclear issue. There was a number of artists living out in Los Alamos. Somebody did a tumor project, which was examining brain tumors in people from waste going into the Rio Grande River and everything. I don't know how many people have lived in New Mexico long enough. There used to be a laundromat or laundry down on Sila Road where they used to wash the lab robes and things from Los Alamos. and the lint coming out of the back of the dryers was radioactive. And, you know, a lot of the, you know, they used to bury a lot of, well, they still have a lot of the waste coming into the Rio Grande watershed. But we convened a panel, scientists from Los Alamos, who work in nuclear issues, and artists who work on nuclear issues. And the scientists always thought, well, the artists don't know what they're talking about, they're making this all up. And we brought them together, and we did it at CNN in the community college in Albuquerque. And at the end of that evening get-together, scientists and artists all talking about what they did, the scientists were amazed at how educated the artists were about what they were, the subject matter, but the artists were also amazed at how the scientists actually listened to them. And it was an interesting bringing together. We need to do that more often. Well, thank you all.